Welcome to Flashback Friday on Harvesting Wisdom. Today, we revisit a powerful moment from our archives that continues to inspire sustainable change. Let's journey back and rediscover the wisdom that shapes our future.
Hello and welcome to another podcast of Harvesting Wisdom. I'm your host, Mike McMahon. And Harvesting Wisdom focuses on telling the stories of individuals and organizations that are involved with sustainable practices, primarily agriculture and land management, but that spreads to many other things, including nutrition. Today, my guest is Aileen, and Aileen, you're from Hamburg?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I notice on your resume that you were in Cape Town for quite some time
in
as
South
well.
Africa, in the Eastern Cape in South Africa, not in Cape Town.
Okay, so you were in South Africa for 6 or 7 years or something.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell everyone about, and now you're with a group called LemonAid ChariTea Foundation.
That's it.
Which is not the company LemonAid, but the company LemonAid kind of set up a foundation to take some of their proceeds to do good in their community.
Absolutely.
And so that's where you are right now with that ChariTea. So what's your background? How did you get involved with this?
Yeah. I'm born and raised in Hamburg. My dad is from Ghana, my mom German. And I spent some time in Ghana after I finished school. And that's important because I guess it was my first exposure to sort of global inequality and my first sort of sense of, okay, if my dad had raised me at home, like in his home country, my whole circumstances would have looked different. The lottery of life, like who you are born to and where you are born, how big of a role that plays in order what kind of life you lead and the ease of life that you have. And those were sort of my idealist growth spurts. And I decided then to study development studies and African studies in London at the School of Oriental and African Studies, which was a great place to engage with the sort of issues and challenges of countries of the wider global south. And a great exposure to a lot of people and personalities and schools of thoughts that were outside of the sort of Eurocentric mantras.
Sure.
So that definitely set me up for a particular way of looking at the world and what's happening out there. And after I finished my BA, I went to do my master's in development studies and tourism at King's College in London. And that's important because I felt that I couldn't really grasp the idea of looking at concepts that didn't work, because the study of global development is the study of studying approaches that have not worked. They're
Failures,
essentially. And I have a very, I think, to this day, childlike logic. I'm like, okay, but if it didn't work, so why are we still doing the same things?
Yeah, but that childlike logic is really what you have to have, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Because without it, we see so many things in the world, and a 12-year-old would look and say, why are you doing that? Mr. President or whatever, Mrs. President or Mrs. Prime Minister, why are you doing that? Because it doesn't seem to make sense. Why are we always in a state of war? Why is there such a disparity
That's it.
Between cultures? And it's interesting, you really do have to go back thousands of years probably to see why certain places develop differently and why, and then throughout history, how inequities began through war and violence, and that's where we are today.
Absolutely.
And so that's a big thing, and it is quite shocking because I think a mindset of the Western world is, well, anybody can do okay, you just have to work hard. Well, not if you're born over there, you don't.
That's it.
That's
and even
wherever that may be.
That's it. And I became acutely aware that you don't even have to be born in a country of the so-called global south. You can just. I mean, if you're working class in the UK, your chances to do anything else are pretty low. In Germany, social mobility is extremely low. So I was the first person in my family to go to university. So I knew academia to me wasn't a natural habitat. And that's important because that's why I decided to do my master's in tourism, because that was something that was graspable for me. I'm like, I can't be, this is something people go somewhere, they travel, they have a certain expectations, and countries have used tourism in their poverty reduction strategy papers for years, like the growth of the sector. And that's how during my undergrad studies, I focused on that a little bit, decided to sort of focus on that during my master's. And then I hadn't even yet handed in my thesis. I had already secured a traineeship in South Africa with the German Development Corporation, with the GIZ now, then the DED. And I did a 1 year in 2009, important because it was the pre-World Cup in South Africa. I got a chance to be a trainee in a program that was looking at building local tourism infrastructure and structures and organizations. And yeah, went there for 1 year and stayed. And 7 years and a child later, I came back and worked for the GIZ all through that, which means I got an insight in the sort of bilateral development world, which also, in my opinion, was quite disillusioning many times. And then came back home to Hamburg after 13 years away to join the LemonAid ChariTea Foundation in 2016.
Wow. And, you know, you talked about that. That's kind of one of the key things that we ask with this podcast is why bother?
Yeah.
So that's the question, because we're all somewhat helpless. We get to a point where we do things and you just get, you know, your face slammed, right? And there's no thanks. In fact, people look at you like you're weird. Why are you doing something, right? But whatever it is, if you're trying to do something as an individual at home, whether it's growing your own garden or just volunteering at a women's shelter or whatever, it seems almost like pointless. You're a drop in the bucket, right? You're powerless, and it's easy to see how people become, completely disillusioned, confused, and frustrated with the entire process, right? So people then turn away and or they justify, well, why they can't join or why won't they help. And so so I ask you, why bother? Why bother working for LemonAid ChariTea? You know, what do you see? And why would people bother to come to volunteer to help with what you're doing?
Great question. I think I personally have an extremely strong sense of justice, and also a real good understanding that a little goes a long way. And also, I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do anything.
Yeah, well, you've seen, so you can't unsee.
That's it.
Right?
So the idea of knowing that I could do a tiny little bit, sometimes even a tiny little bit, and ease somebody else's day, then I would, if I didn't do that and go home and think about that, I'd feel shame almost. That's on a personal level. If I then look at it from a structural level, I feel absolutely the same. So knowing that, for example, the system as it's now, the capitalist system as it is, the way that business works, the unhinged growth and continued industrialization, and its repercussions, and that we're already feeling. So we know the planetary boundaries are telling us we can't continue as is. Right. And then seeing that there are so many great initiatives trying to come up with alternatives of business models that allow for one thing to happen while somebody else can be true at the same time. Like, so for example, in this case, I was drawn to this social business construct because on the one hand, you are in the market, you're selling a product, okay? And if you don't know that there is, nothing on it except the little wordplay tells you that there is something charitable underneath. It's also a good product. So yeah, I've been told.
I just swallowed one down, and
only
6 grams of sugar.
That's it, and the company has managed to place it
Delicious
in places where it's seen as a premium product, definitely. it's fair trade, it's organic. I mean, there's so many things that are right with it. And yet it can just sustain itself on its own, as in it can just stand there on its own as a great product, as opposed to other products that are just a lemonade and don't look at the wider world. And I was drawn to this because on one hand, from the sourcing perspective, it's fair trade, it's organic, it's already looking at making the best possible choice, okay?
As a sustainable product.
As a sustainable product,
right.
And a sustainable business practice and ethics in how you deal with your suppliers, while wanting to do this little bit more and giving 5 cents per bottle from the first bottle that was ever sold to the foundation.
And what that does is that proves that you can do the right thing and still make money.
Absolutely.
And that's the crazy thing, that's what frustrates me when I see the way the world is. You know, the oil companies are going to continue to drill. We always will use fossil fuels.
Yeah.
There's no reason why we can't also support other alternatives,
That's
right?
it.
And I think a lot of the fuel companies are the big investors in a lot of these alternatives because they see it, right? But that's the same with every organization that we're working with. It's the same with,
absolutely, and I believe, and that's what drew me in, because I like the idea, and I mean, 8 years ago, it was still very much in the startup phase. And I really loved the idea of being able to build something at the foundation. There was 2 of us when I started, and we were able to come up with our own approach. The funds are from our sponsor, the company, which allowed us, that is free from taxpayers' obligations, as in taxpayers' money obligations, which are government indicators at the end of the day. So we were free from that. We don't have to fundraise to this day additionally.
Oh, and God, I wish I had that.
Yeah. And which means coming from the bilateral development world and now experiencing this freedom, being able to come up with our own logic and being like, okay, we want to work in the regions where the ingredients are sourced, which are all regions that are globally excluded from sort of fair trade systems, essentially. And then we can come up with how we want to support organizations in these regions. And that was such a great challenge, and it is to this day. And that's what drew me, the idea of being able to really build something.
So I went through your bio a little bit, and you just described quite a bit of how you got to where you are. But I noticed that in Germany, you know, you are working with a lot of single moms, with the Black community that's been marginalized somewhat. So this happens everywhere on the planet, by the way. This is in the U.S. We have lots of homeless. We have people with drug problems. We have single parents that are trying to survive, and so this is it's kind of an epidemic. Somewhat of ignorance, but also apathy. And again, that's one of the why bother things. So tell me, 8 years is not a long time. It must seem like a fair amount of time for you, but where did you first of all, you called them, they didn't call you, or how did that all work? How did you talk a company into helping you set up a foundation?
Oh, no, they already existed. They had already started. A year after the company was founded, they set up the foundation, and then it was just sort of dormant. It was there as a sort of as a vehicle, but the founders of
takes different skill sets to run something.
And they were doing a little bit on the side in their free time, but in 2015 they hired the first person to support them in part-time, which is Agnes Fritz, by the way, Micha Fritz's wife, that Viva Con Agua. There's a combination. That's how I'm quite close to them. I've met them. And so we had, the company existed, the foundation existed, and they had for the first time then, they were recruiting a project coordinator to come join them. And that was what I applied. I didn't know of them. I was out of the country for so long. I didn't even know they existed, to be honest. And a friend forwarded me the ad. So it was absolutely. And then all the things that you alluded to before. So my sort of work, my community work here in Hamburg is, I do this in my free time. So, but obviously...
So you run a nonprofit, and on your free time you do...
Yeah, so I started a monthly a monthly community meeting called Community Kids, which is a meeting for Black parents and kids, in order to be able to have a space that is sort of safe from judgment, and kids just being themselves and realizing that there are family constructs that are similar to their own. In seeing that in Germany, it's a minority. We are the minority, meaning you also make minority experiences, and sometimes you need a place where you can speak of them without judgment.
In a day of social media, being able to just be a kid without moralizing eyes.
That's it.
Absolutely judging you.
That's it. And that was and I started it from a personal, like all the things that I'm involved in, I usually stem from like a personal experience. So it was, I came back to Germany with my daughter. I am a single parent. And I felt strongly that I was looking, my daughter's father, South African, she's a Black child. And I realized, so my own Black experience in Germany was sort of heightened than with having my daughter in institutions. It's different.
Somebody you're responsible
Absolutely. And it's also different for me than it was for my mother, who's a white woman. So those were all things that I was learning and sort of experiencing, and out of my own sort of processes, I started these things. These are all things I do in my free time. However, the values and idealism behind justice and being able to have the same opportunities, being able to be treated the same, they're universal, they're the same. They're absolutely integral to the work that we do with the foundation. So a lot of the times, and I'm realizing this now, I'm often Aileen from LemonAid ChariTea Foundation. Wherever I go, even if I speak on other topics,
that's good,
because they are so interlinked and they match. It's an absolute value match, and I think that's why bother.
Okay, so now it's you, and you said you had a kind of a partner, or that's kind of running this organization now. Who set the mission and the vision and the values for the organization? Did they obviously had started something, but then did they run with it, or do you meet with them and come up, or is it just something the two of you do? And what is it? What is the mission? What do you do?
Yeah. So our vision is that everybody has sustainable access to sustainable livelihoods. Essentially, people having choices, being able to live a decent life wherever they are in the world. All right, that's the vision. And the mission is that we support local organizations in the countries where the ingredients are grown, always local. So we don't work with intermediaries. We always support local indigenous structures. And this can be usually around entrepreneurship, income generation. Those tend to be the sort of focus areas, as well as looking at education, but we're looking at vocational training and sort of entrepreneurial training more than basic education. So we're not so much in the basic education game. And this can then manifest in all sorts of different initiatives. So lots of agricultural organizations obviously apply. It will then be access to finance, access to markets, development, product development, and so on, that organizations apply to us for. It can be advocacy projects as well. Usually we work with a lot of marginalized groups within those particular societies. In Rwanda, for example, with the Batwa community in South Africa. We work obviously with the previously disadvantaged, which is essentially Black and colored communities in South Africa.
Right.
So we've realized the values and the core vision was set by us as the team. So after we were just doing, and we had some sort of like unspoken common values, and then after a year or two we're like, okay, we need to really make them explicit and focus, and we developed our mission, our vision, our core values. We developed we rethought our approach, and we developed the focus area based on the decisions that we had made previously. We said, okay, so what projects have we said yes to earlier when we evaluated? And where are we drawn to? Like, what is something that we keep on saying yes to again and again? And that's how we developed our focus areas.
It is wild how we start and we have one direction, and then it kind of
Yeah.
goes all over, and then you find that niche in which you're most effective. Right?
Absolutely.
And you talked about the ingredients.
Yeah.
How many different countries and what ingredients are we talking about? Obviously, there's a little bit of sugar. There's not much, but sugar grown maybe in Africa. Maybe.
And so, for example, at some point, I mean, obviously, we have 7 project countries as the foundation. So we focus on 7 of them. There are more countries that ingredients are being sourced, but we are a small organization. There's 5 of us still to this day. So we focus on 7. And which is, for example, South Africa, which there's a rooibos iced tea. So rooibos only grows in South Africa. So
do people drink that outside of? I never see. I don't see that tea even available too often.
Yeah, in Germany it's relatively.
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
okay.
It's a niche, but people are drinking it, and the iced tea definitely is being drunk.
Okay.
Then we work in Sri Lanka. That was the first project country. That's where tea comes from, green tea and black tea also for the charity range. Then there is limes from Mexico. I mean, there's always this sort of combination or connection to the country around it. But our focus areas are not necessarily always on the value chains of the particular product.
But you just mentioned Mexico.
Yeah. So we
Sri
work
Lanka.
in Sri Lanka, India. Peru, Mexico. We work in South Africa, Rwanda, and Madagascar.
So your passport must be stamped more than mine, maybe. So are you physically? How do you know? You've selected these places, and now you go to these
visit
communities.
Before we fund.
And how do you do? What are you teaming up with people in these places?
Yeah. So really important. Essentially, we are donors. We don't implement. So we feel very strongly, and that's also part of a very power critical approach from our perspective, that there are so many capable local structures, organizations that have done their work for years and years and years. Some of the directors of NGOs that we work with, I mean, they have done what they do for 30 years. They have grown up in the village next door. They have an integral mission and vision for the regions that they still live in, right? Sure. And so for me to come in and be like, oh, don't you need this particular irrigation system? Like, who am I, like, with my running water, right?
Right.
So that's something that we take very serious. And therefore, we decided that we want to work only with local organizations. It was a long process. And here and there, we have worked with sort of intermediary organizations because it made sense. Right. But generally, we feel, no, there are so many capable organizations, even if it makes the search for them a little bit more difficult sometimes. So we support, they apply to us with their ideas, and we fund based on feasibility, on previous experience, and so on. I would argue that the majority of our effort and resources go into the process before we fund. So the evaluation, the resources, and visiting. We visit every single project before we fund it. So it's very much about personal relationships. It's very much getting to know the people behind it and then making a decision, and not just based on paper. Because what we realized is that the application doesn't tell you the whole story. Right. It's written in usually a second language, sometimes a third language. There's lots lost in translation. We have a particular way. I mean, we're German, which means a German organization. We have a very particular way of reading and writing things. We're very clear. Things have to be explicit. Right. We work with cultures that aren't like that like to sort of describe things rather than calling on them by name.
There's a different hierarchy.
There's a different hierarchy of what's more important in what we should be, in what we should know. And so we realized that the visit is so important in making decisions. And so, and then we fund, let's say we've evaluated it. We have 2 different boards that these decisions go through. And then we visit and then say, okay, yeah, we loved it. It seems great. Sometimes got consultants to help us as an associate's friends, previous project partners, to have a look at it and tell us if it makes sense or not. And then we fund, and then we do visit along the way, but we're rather on the journey with a project. And we fund between 3 and 6 years. So it's also a longer period of time. And
there's got to be accountability as well.
There's accountability, there's reporting. There's reporting, there is a
tough.
reporting, but the fact that we do come physically is interesting. It makes such a big difference. The other day I was talking to a project partner and we were discussing a potential top-up fund, and he said to me, but Aileen, like, you've come, you've seen it, like every time you come, there's something new. Like you do already know that this is money that's invested well. And I'm like, yeah, actually, can't argue with that.
Yeah.
There is progress every time. And so, yeah, that's pretty much the core of our approach. And we've done this now since 2010, since 2016 with a more systematic approach. And we've worked with about 80 organizations so far since I've been there in the last 8 years. We have 36 current active funding relationships, and are immensely privileged that we get to accompany and journey with so many organizations all over the world, and looking at new approaches and seeing what works, sometimes what doesn't work, but we're always learning, and that's amazing.
So how do you, right now, all the funding's coming from this corporation, which is...
Yeah, there's a little bit, we do have
amazing.
Some donations.
You do?
Some, but they're not significant in comparison to what we get in sponsorship.
And you don't have fundraising employees looking for that kind of thing. But
not yet.
How about if the average person watching this decides, hey, they want to, is there work opportunities for them too, where they could come to your office and help you lick envelopes or anything like that?
No.
You don't have that?
No,
okay.
We don't. It's simply... there's opportunities engaging with us and maybe lending us their expertise if it's something that we lack, because we're a small team, always. Like pro bono expertise is something that we're always looking for. But and donations, obviously, we will. Those donations are going to go to more projects. But we've decided that we didn't want to spend the significant amount of effort in fundraising because we quite like the size that we're at. We also like the budget that we are able to work with is still sort of a size that allows us to really know every single partner. And that's a very personal experience of working in the bilateral field, where you work then with big €1 million programs, is the idea that trickle down doesn't really work. And we also know this from an economic perspective.
Even the World Health Organization,
Absolutely.
And every time there's this big funding from the UN or whatever, it seems to go to the wrong hands.
And it goes
and
a lot of money then goes into decentralizing structures in order to be able, and so we've decided we didn't want that. So we want to work with the local organizations where the impact is still, where we can measure impact, where we can see the change. And it's just a preference. It's not to knock other approaches of bigger scale projects. I'm sure also important, but we feel that this is the sort of place where we are comfortable.
So is there a typical scope of service that you're looking for when you go to these places? You're trying to get in with schools, or you're literally trying to feed people or work with farmers, or what is your typical
and in
scope?
fact, we have done all of that. We funded all of this before, but always embedded in a bigger vision of, for example, we have worked with an NGO that was looking at entrepreneurial, sort of basic entrepreneurial training in Rwandan schools, and they call Teach a Man to Fish. And they're actually also based in the UK. So that was one in the early stages where we also worked with intermediaries that already had great infrastructure and partners in Rwanda in this case, because we were just starting out in Rwanda. So it absolutely made sense. And they were working with school businesses. So schools and classes and students coming up with their own business ideas. We've done that before. We work with organizations where nutrition is a part of the project proposal, but in this case, it was also the development of small food businesses, right? Being able to, in South Africa, in the township economies, being able to provide healthier alternatives to kids. That was the focus there. So the applications that come to us can be in very different scopes and very different fields, but they always have one core, and that is either transmitting entrepreneurial skill, or having some sort of income generating benefit for the people that participate. Why? Because in most of these countries, if we look at South Africa, with an official unemployment rate of 32%, an unofficial youth unemployment rate of almost 70%, right?
And that's one of the more successful countries.
There you go. And that means if you're young in South Africa, the potential for you of finding decent work that allows you to feed yourself and eventually family are almost nil, which means the only other way is creating your own business somehow, selling something, right? So basic entrepreneurial knowledge is not just an add-on like it would be here potentially. It's a necessity.
Right.
So that's where this focus comes from, and not because we feel everybody should start their own startup and we feel innovation in tech is amazing. It's rather more the necessity of the economies that they are set in.
Sure. We do, something similar. Actually, it wasn't my idea, like most good ideas are not, but it was someone in the organization came up with the idea of micro projects.
Yeah.
And they ended up taking off, and they're more effective because it might be a couple of students or a couple of teachers or somebody from the community comes to us, and we need to have them show us the project and the scope, but they're usually such small dollars.
Yeah.
But those small dollar projects seem to always be so impactful.
Absolutely.
We financed the beginning of, raising chickens. And within 3 months, 6 months, they say, thank you, we don't need any more.
Yeah.
We've successfully done it. And so that's kind of what we're doing as well. We come up with the idea of funding, but we also have to do capacity work because, people have not had their own business. People haven't.
That's it.
Don't have the equipment a lot of times, or just the know-how to do some of the basics.
Yeah, and so that's why, absolutely, and we do this too, but through the local NGO structures. So there would be an NGO that will formulate a project which would maybe have this micro project part as one component of their proposal, but then would have capacity building and training and monitoring as well under their project proposal. So a lot of this happens in the exact same manner, only that we are not the ones building capacity, but you're looking for that in your partners. We're not just looking for it. We do know that it's necessary.
Right.
There's very small. We don't have very many projects that don't have a capacity building component. They all have some sort of training and personal development as part of it.
So what's the big dream? I mean, where do you see
I'm already
this
living
organization? It. No, not your big dream. The dream for this nonprofit, do you want it to expand because you know it's effective and it's doing well? So, but when it expands, it turns into a whole different thing, right?
That's it.
Now it's big business and everything else. So
you're right.
Where do you see it going?
You know what? I'm undecided. On one hand, obviously more money means you can do more things. So when the company grows, we grow. If the company grows, we will grow. And I quite like it at the stage where we're at. Yeah. I would love, and I do believe that from a business sustainability perspective, why do we always need growth? But I also know that the market doesn't work that way. The market needs new growth, either new or grow, in order to sustain yourself. I also understand that. So my big dream is that the market logic changes to let's keep brands and organizations as they are because we are. We like them as consumers. They're used to them, they like them, and they're okay with what's out there, and we're not always craving for the next big thing.
Right.
And I think that's translatable to a lot of other things. So on one hand, looking at consumer behavior in order for the business also to be able to sort of transform and stay where they're at. But if we grow, and which is very likely because we have grown since I've been there, there has been year-on-year growth, and our budgets have always been, secured over the last years. We would definitely do a little bit more of the same. We would potentially look at more pilot projects that might be of a little bit bigger scale with partners that we've worked with for a long time already. And maybe also expanding in our strategic focus to areas that we're not yet servicing. That could also be one of the components that could add in making this already live dream even bigger and better.
Well, you know that every dollar has got impact. That's something that I don't think a lot of people understand, is how much impact you can have when you're going to a place that's in such need, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're looking at it saying, there's so much need. How can I do more?
But at the same time, with our growth, if we were growing, there's also more money going into sustaining a structure. And so I feel with the size, and maybe we do need a little bit more capacity in our team. But I don't want to be a multinational NGO. Like, that's not my dream. My dream isn't to become this big NGO that does all this work everywhere.
Right.
I'm quite okay. Like, my personal view, and this is very much, I mean, our board might potentially say, no, we want to be bigger. But my personal look at it is that at the size that we're at, we are still able to be in contact with everyone. We're still able to fulfill our personal relationships with everyone, and therefore have also an emotional connection to every project that we are involved in.
Well, how about this? Because this is kind of the same concept I've had, and that is, there's only so much we can do, physically, and you're right. At some point, the structure ends up getting all your funding, and you don't get as much done. But do you have a model that other companies, maybe not a competitor of LemonAid, but maybe another large company that has a sustainability officer says, hey, we want to do what LemonAid is doing because it's so good and it's so effective. Do you have anything like written that, you can show the world? Would that be a direction you'd go?
Well, I guess this is something you would have to ask the CEO of the company from a business model perspective, because there's definitely a lot of sharing, and there's definitely very much an open source approach in saying, well, why don't you do it as well? And I have, in the last years that I've been here, I've talked to countless founders that wanted to find out more about the foundation angle, and while in their founding process, knowing already that they want to create impact over the product, above and beyond the product that they were trying to launch. So that's already a good sign. I do also really strongly believe that in 2024 and beyond, if you don't have a sustainability angle in whichever pillar, right, in your business idea, then how can you found anything in these times without thinking of the wider world? And I know people still do, and it boggles my mind that that's still possible. But I do believe that everybody would have to, like, that business only works if the wider world is considered in one way or another, be it your environmental impact with the product that you're launching, be it the psychological impact on kids of the product that you're launching, whatever. There needs to be some sort of, you need to make up for the damage that you're about to possibly do, at least. That needs to be the tiniest part. And
what do they do to, let's see, I'm looking at the bottle. I don't really see a lot here about the good work they're doing. So
see?
Where do you see
Isn't that interesting? They don't even need to talk about it, and they still exist.
But they're inspiring the idea is there's so many companies that don't do that.
That's true.
We have such a need in the world.
You're right.
Where would I find more information on
the company
LemonAid and ChariTea?
Definitely on social media and on their website. The founder, Paul Bethke, definitely does speak. Did a TED Talk. They're speaking about the business and the business model. But there's also very much just doing it without needing the applause all the time, right?
Well, it's not the applause per se. It's just the idea, hey, we got something that's working.
But,
everybody should do it.
That's true. And you're really... So I'm currently writing a keynote for a company looking at building a sustainable brand. And I, again, need to qualify. I'm not the company, but I have been able to observe what being part of a social business contract is. And one of that is that if you really believe what you're doing, it's not a business approach that was chosen because it's marketable. It was
part of selling.
And it was fought for many. I mean, if you give away 5 cents of every bottle, that's a lot of money over there.
So let me ask you, did you ever ask the owners or the CEO what was their motivation behind all of this?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I guess that's the storytelling that comes in there. And the motivation was, number one, the fact that there's two. And I think they marry this mission perfectly. The one is, and it started out with the lime lemonade. The one is that there wasn't a great lemonade on the market that tasted good, as fresh as the lime
and that's a reason to be in business. Yeah, sure.
That's the reason of being a business. But at the same time, and it was clear that it needed to be as sustainable as it could. So organic and fair trade, which if you are in business, it's quite a task to do something only organic or only fair trade. Can you imagine what that means? But secondly, the founder also worked for a short period of time in the development sector after university, and he in Sri Lanka, and he was very dismayed with the way that money was being spent. And onward, and it was in the post-tsunami reconstruction efforts. And he just thought it was unfair, like that there's this random demarcation of what is a tsunami area and what wasn't, and then on one side of the road you would still be able to spend some money, and on the other side you wouldn't. He was just also childlike logic, almost like it does not make sense. So it was rather the idea of wanting to create independent funds in order to be able to support organizations that you really believed in. And so this is then the marriage basically of these two.
Isn't it funny that the same people who want to create a product that's better, that's sustainable, also have in their mindset, we can take some of the profits and help other people.
And you know what? It's not surprising, because in my sort of activist, volunteer capacity is the other part of me, almost, I also realize that it's always the same people doing all the work.
That's always the case.
There's always a few people that do everything, that think of everything, and that carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. And then there's a lot of people doing nothing, like contributing nothing. And I have all these mental breakdowns so often, and I'm thinking, but why is that I'm already, again, that person doing this? If only one other person said, I'll do this today, you know?
It's similar in an office setting where let's say you have X number of employees, 100 employees, and you have a big sensitive project that has to get done like now. For me, I always give it to the person who's the busiest because it gets done. I'm not going to give it to the one who's sitting over here.
You're right, but from a management perspective, that's not particularly fair.
It may not be, but if you want the job to get done, it's always that one person.
That's true, and at the same time...
So how do we reach these people who answer the question, why bother, with, I'm not going to bother?
Let me tell you. I have seen some things that do work. There is an organization here, Gobanyo, which is also works with providing cleaning opportunities for people that are currently homeless, of being able to get sanitation, access to sanitation and fresh clothes and so on. And the founder of Gobanyo, Gulay, I love her, she's a good friend. She also founded the Sunshine Cafe, which is a cafe that happens every Sunday in a bar. That's usually a bar. And every Sunday it opens up as a cafe where people that are out, that don't have homes, that are out on the street can come and order whatever they like to drink and can get a piece of cake and bread and something to eat. And they can feel like a client that's going somewhere and that's ordering somewhere. And they rely on volunteer work. And this is a place that is so unattached. You can go on a Sunday. You can bring a cake. You can go and prepare sandwiches. You can live your barista dreams and do cappuccinos. So it's easy.
So you can use volunteers.
They can volunteer. They rely on volunteers, and it's easy access. Like, you don't have to commit to something, and people come again and again because it's fun.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun, and you do feel good on a Sunday afternoon after, and you've done a good work. And I do believe that the barrier for a lot of people, especially today, where people are just overwhelmed by the state of the world and social media overwhelms them. So being active and getting out and actually doing something seems like a world away. Yeah. But if you have something that is such low barrier where you can just go and do it, people are more likely. And so the people that I find there are some of the usual suspects that are with me in every place where you need to do something. But then there's also these really people that usually don't have access to these spaces. And for them, it's also great. And that's, I think, the important thing is my work and all the initiatives that I do on top of that, they all give me something, lots of energy. I wouldn't be able to do the one without the other. It feeds me, it gives me, I get to learn. It's a lot of inspiration all the time without wanting to sort of shift into sort of trauma porn and saying, you know, poverty is great. No, but it allows me to meet visionaries all over the world. And that's inspiring. Like, I profit all the time.
Yeah.
And I do believe that that's the difference in looking at why it's worth it and why bother. It's because there's also something in it for me.
Yeah, well, there has to be something in it for everyone.
Absolutely.
Every time they're doing it. And well, I that's kind of where my realization came is during COVID, we kind of had to shut down the things we were doing. But instead, I had that community garden. So we collected food from farmers that was going to waste and worked with the food network. And we ended up asking volunteers to come out during COVID, one day a week on a Saturday, and help us pack food boxes. And we gave away about 1 million pounds of food. But what was interesting was we had, in a period of, well, the COVID period was not quite a year before there was enough funding for people to get back to normal. But, you know, what was kind of amazing is we had about 600 volunteers, and they would come up and say, I had to get out of the house.
Yeah, there you go. There was something in it for them.
This is something, and, you know, they were all disappointed, but I was like, you know, COVID's over now, you know, we don't, we're moving on to doing other things. But it is interesting to see how important it was to people just to show up once in a while to do that volunteerism.
Absolutely.
Which means to me that if we can figure out or unlock that potential in humans to help other people.
Absolutely. I believe it's almost like a button that needs to be pressed, because I do believe that we do want to take care of each other, and there is a part in everyone that realizes that we only live because we are together. Like, we are, as a creatures, we only survive together.
Right.
And which is easy to miss these days, right? But I do believe that button can be pressed, and it's finding out how you can press that button and how you can convince people that coming out on this Sunday or donating those €5 or whatever it is not gonna be an extra effort on your hand, but you're also gaining something, and you're going to come home with a sense of purpose, with a sense of having achieved something, and with more energy than before. And I think it's up to us to create ways of getting access and not making it an exclusive club. I do believe that that's really important.
Well, I appreciate you being here and harvesting your wisdom. There's things that I can definitely learn. Thank you all for joining us. If you like the podcast, please like it for us. And Aileen, thank you very much with LemonAid
ChariTea Foundation.
Took me a while to figure the chair. I was like, is that cherry tea?
Yeah.
And I was like, but what a great name. So appreciate you coming today, and
thank you for having
me here, actually, here in your hometown of Hamburg.
Thank
you so much. Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Like, share, and subscribe for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for additional resources and visit our guest webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey. Until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.